the margin of the ocean, one pleasant evening in the month of June, the pleasant singing blackbird his charming notes to tune. 'Twas there I spied a woman, all in great grief and woe, conversing with young Bonaparte concerning the bonny bunch of roses. And then up and spoke the young Napoleon, and he took hold of his mother's hand. Oh, mother dear, be patient, and soon I will take command. I'll raise a terrible army, and through tremendous danger go, and in spite of all the universe, I'll conquer the bonny bunch of roses. And when first you saw the great Napoleon, you fell down on your bended knee, and you asked your father's life of him, and he's granted it most manfully. 'Twas then he took an army, and o'er the frozen Alps did go, and he said, I'll conquer Moscow, and come back for the bonny bunch of roses. And so he's took 300,000 fighting men, and kings likewise for to join his throng. He was as well provided for, enough to take the whole world along. But when he came to Moscow, all overpowered by driving snow, and Moscow was a-blazing, and he lost the bonny bunch of roses. Oh, my son, don't speak so venturesome, for England she has a heart of oak, and England and Ireland and Scotland, their unity has never been broke. And so, my son, thank God you're a father. In St. Helena is a body, it lies low, and you will follow after. Beware of the bonny bunch of roses, and it's goodbye to my mother forever, for I am on my dying bed. Had I lived I might have been clever, but now I bow my youthful head, and while our bodies do moulder, and weeping willows over us do grow, the deeds of brave Napoleon will sting the bonny bunch of roses. By the margin of the ocean, one pleasant evening in the month of June, pleasant singing blackbird, his charming notes to tune. 'Twas there I spied a female, all in great grief and woe, conversing with young Bonaparte concerning the bonny bunch of roses. The magic of the ocean, one pleasant evening in the month of June, the pleasant singing blackbird.
And here we are. Good morning, everyone. I'm John Coleman from ApocatastasisInstitute for the Humanities, an alternative college and high school here on New Milford, Connecticut, USA. The purpose of this live broadcast, thanks to your generosity and recording, is to get in day 278. 278. All right, we're farther than I thought. So very good. We're looking at the last part of Napoleon's career, his time on Elba, the 100 Days, Waterloo, and the infamous and disgraceful chaining of the man on St. Helena. I often don't break the historian's code of weighing in and giving one's opinion on the matter, but I do think the final treatment of Napoleon by the British was cruel in a way that only the British can be cruel, and cruel in a way that only modernity can be cruel. In any case, we'll get to that, and you can appraise whether my appraisal is correct or not. So here we are, and just one announcement concerning our dear college. I'm going to put that on the screen here. And that is, of course, our great collaborations. It's been one of the works of this past 6 months, at least. And the one I bring to your attention as I queue up the screen share is our autism seminar with Janice Barcello on the 26th of June. So let me just put this up for your viewing pleasure, and we'll get on with it. So Janice is a very published and very erudite woman on the topic of birth and birth trauma, healing, family growth, and this, of course, is right down her alley as we're looking at this scourge of autism. And I used that word the other day, and someone checked me on it. How dare you, John, you son of a gun, how dare you say that autism is a scourge? I'm sorry, if you're shitting your pants at 25 and can't talk and pounding your head against a wall, you're not going to gaslight me and tell me that autism is a super magical power. I know about the telepathy tapes and all this jazz, but listen, autism can be a magical thing, just like losing a limb can be a magical thing, or going blind. I mean, okay, you find a silver lining in something, okay, and God can work with that, and may God give people in tribulation ease. But there's a difference between saying I'm making lemons out of my lemonade and saying something tribulation such as autism is an objectively good thing. Anyway, I need to behave myself. The point is, it would be grand if there could be less autism, and Janice is going to try to help us by particularly focusing on the back door of ultrasound as being one of the culprits. That the microwaving of the brains, particularly of baby boys or fetal boys, does no one any good, and that in fact, as she and I spoke about in one of our promo interviews, in fact, there's also a lot of sterility that attends the fetus that has been ultrasounded. That is to say, even in the womb, the little boy and the little girl, their fertility has been greatly reduced. That's hard to imagine themselves as fetuses, imagine their fertility. But anyway, Janice will get into all of it, and you can find out about the class where you can send your tuition to her Stripe, and then you can find out about Janice and all this good stuff. So that is the autism ultrasound connection coming up here at Apocatastasis in June. All right. So now let us set up the music, of course. You didn't think you were getting away with that, did you? Or without that. I like the background music. I think you do too. So we're even Stevens there. What shall we do? Are you in the mood for Celtic music or piano? We did piano yesterday, so. And they have all these sorts of new agey synth pieces, which wouldn't be appropriate at all. But neither. Okay. Well, you know what? Napoleon goes to Saint Helena. That's an island. Japan is an island. We're going to go for Gandana Nuata from the Kurosawa film. So let's just double check the volume, and then we'll recap and get H.G. Wells queued up. Okay. Okay, there we go. I can live with that. I think you can live with that. All right, so let's change the camera and recap where we've been. So we looked yesterday, especially at the Moscow campaign, and in particular, really this biting off of too much that causes the circumstances to prevail in France, where the coalition led by England is able to seize Paris. At which point Napoleon really does not have an option. He has no army to speak of. It's been scattered. It's not been destroyed, as we're about to find out. He has, as I've mentioned repeatedly, Napoleon has a huge amount of almost fanatical support on the part of his soldier base, which is strange because he repeatedly leaves them high and dry. Okay, I'm trying to find the proper camera here. Oh, these little toggles. You'd mess too, so I don't want to hear it from you. Anyway, Napoleon, nope, don't want this. Well, we actually do want this camera. I just need to position it proper. All right, Napoleon then is exiled to Elba, which is off the coast. Let's see if we can get a convenient map. It's just a little island, just a few miles off the coast of France. And I don't have my maps when I need it. We'll see what we can come up with here. All right. When I change this again, I'll get the map up. Okay. So we're mostly going to be reading out of part 5 of this chapter, The Career of Napoleon Bonaparte, where it talks about his initial exile and then the 100 days, that is to say, the almost supernova burst of energy that Napoleon exhibits and his men when he breaks out of Elba. But in the meantime, it's It's party time for the old conservatives, the old nobles, the church. Not that they were conservative, I would even say elements that were sidelined by Bonapartism, like the Jacobins and other factions of revolutionaries. It is party, party, party time, and probably the biggest party time of them all is with the nobility of the rest of Europe, who think that they have killed the revolution. They have finally destroyed the French Revolution, which said it would destroy them. And so it is an apotheosis. Again, I hope these allusions are helpful. If they're not, just discard them. But this would be something like the second Trump presidency, right? You had a whole political class that had been exiled for a season, and it felt an injustice had been done it, and then it comes back with great triumphalism, and that's what you're going to see both now and then certainly at the Congress of Vienna, when the conservatives finally have caged, quite literally, Napoleon. But let us proceed. This was the natural and proper end. We had ended yesterday literally with an observation that just as Napoleon began by firing on a royalist mob, on his way out of the country, Napoleon's life was endangered by a royalist mob. And so things for the moment have come full circle, but there will be one last supernova of activity. And there had been any real wisdom in the conduct of human, we shall have to tell the concentration of human science and will upon the task his career had interrupted. The task of building up a world system of justice and free effort in place of the bankrupt ancient order. But we have to tell nothing of the sort. Science and wisdom were conspicuously absent from the great council of the Allies. One of the sayings that we use for this time period concerning the behavior of the old altar and throne sorts, it's usually applied particularly to the Bourbon family, who had been displaced, of course, was that they, in their exile, had learned nothing and they had forgotten nothing. Came the vague humanitarianism and dreamy vanity of Tsar Alexander, came the shaken Habsburgs of Austria, the resentful Hohenzollerns of Prussia, the aristocratic traditions of Britain, still badly frightened by the revolution and its conscience all awry, with stolen commons and sweated factory children. Very tongue-in-cheek criticism there of the British. The British still badly frightened by the revolution, and its conscience is awry. Again, with the stolen commons, you cannot underestimate the ramifications of the enclosure movement, so-called, politely called, the stealing of the land from the poor of England. This is the beginning of land ownership and what this does to English-speaking societies. The conscience is still awry because of that. And, of course, those factory children. So these are no saints any more than Napoleon or the Jacobins before him were. No people come to the Congress, but only monarchs and foreign ministers. The Congress had hardly assembled before diplomatists set to work making secret bargains and treaties behind each other's backs. Just a sign of things to come when we get to the results of the First World War a century later, secret treaties and whatever. Nothing could exceed the pomp and splendor of the Congress, which gathered in Vienna after a magnificent ceremonial visit of Allied sovereigns to London. The social side of Congress was very strong. Pretty ladies abounded as they must. There was a galaxy of stars and uniforms, endless dinners, balls, and a mighty flow of bright anecdotes and sparkling wit. The brightest spirit of the gathering was a certain Talleyrand, very interesting, one of Napoleon's princes, a very brilliant man indeed, who had been a pre-revolutionary cleric, who had proposed revolutionary confiscation of church estates, and who now was for bringing back their Bourbons. So this Talleyrand is a slippery man. See his name here. This Talleyrand reminds us, going back to the Reformation times, and that funny song that we went through, the Vicar of Bray. You remember that song a few weeks ago? The Vicar of Bray. That cleric in the song, as the religions changed in England with the Reformation again and again and again, the vicar was not going to be put out of a job, and he just kept changing his religion. Likewise, Talleyrand keeps changing his politics, depending on which is most expedient. The Allies frittered away precious time in more and more rapacious disputes. The Bourbons returned to France. Back came all the remainder of emigres with them, eager for restitution and revenge. Don't underestimate. One great egoism had been swept away, only to reveal a crowd of meaner egoists. The new king was the brother of Louis XVI. He had taken the title of Louis XVIII. That's interesting. What happened to number 17? Well, let's find out. Eagerly to do so, as he learned that his little nephew, the 17, was dead in the temple. We spoke about that. Louis XVII was horribly treated by the Jacobins, etc., as was Marie Antoinette, and not just the guillotining, of course, but also the calumny that was heaped upon that innocent woman. Anyway, Louis XVIII now, the brother, was gouty and clumsy, not perhaps ill-disposed, but the symbol of the ancient system. And by the way, don't forget, back during the initial part of the French Revolution, how the Duke of Orleans, within Louis' family, had been plotting and planning to make the best of his career as well. So just because you're a monarchist and just because you're allied with the Ancien regime, don't get simple and emotional. Those people are just as plotting as the Jacobins and the Bonapartists. All that was new in France felt the heavy threat of reaction that came with it. So this is a great word that typically heard in the left, reaction. So reaction are those conservative elements that want to go back. So you hear that term reaction or reactionary. This was no liberation, only a new tyranny, a heavy and inglorious tyranny instead of an active and splendid one. All right, what did the American Tories say? I would rather one king 3,000 miles away than 3,000 kings 1 mile away. And there is something rather banal about the tyranny of liberalism compared to the tyranny of monarchy. Was there no hope for France? The Bourbons showed particular malice against the veterans of the Grande Armée. That's Napoleon's force, what's left of it. Rags, dribs and drabs at this point. France was now full of returned prisoners of war who found themselves under a cloud. Napoleon had been packed off to a little consolation empire of his own upon the island of Elba. He was still to be called emperor and kept a certain state. The chivalry or whim of Alexander had insisted upon this treatment of his fallen rival. The Habsburgs had taken away his Habsburg empress. She went willingly enough to Vienna, and he never saw Josephine again. Actually, I think it's not Josephine. He had ditched Josephine by now. Louisa. I forget her last name, so-called, her title. After 11 months of Elba, Napoleon judged that France had had enough of the Bourbons. This is the important part, right? This is why you need to break down this book and not read it too fast. After 11 months of pacing around Elba, being the town mayor of Elba, as some people say, Napoleon judged that France had enough of the Bourbons. He contrived to evade the British ships that watched his island and reappeared at Cannes in France in his last gamble against fate. His progress to Paris, we're going to look at a map after this paragraph. His progress to Paris was a triumphal procession. He walked on white Bourbon cockades. Then for 100 days, the 100 days, he was master of France again. Let's open up a map, and we're going to take a look here of some of the sites that we're looking at. Just a one go. I want to look at Elba in relation to Cannes. I want to look Cannes as relation to Paris. I want to look then where is Waterloo in Belgium, and then finally we will look with a lump in our throat, perhaps if I do my job, a lump in our throat at St. Helena's in the middle of the South Atlantic. But first things first. Let's see. Elba. Let's see. I'm pulling it up here on the Google Maps, and I'll put it on the screen. See if it comes up at all. I can even get directions from humble old New Milford to Elba. But for some reason, they're giving me a town. It looks like in Tunisia or something. So, just Dibia. Go figure. But I know where Elba is, even if Google Maps does not know. Whoa, this is like in the Red Sea. Hold on. What on earth? They put me in Egypt. Well, with Napoleon's army, I guess Google Maps is having some fun there with me and Napoleon. But anyway, we'll cite this proper and then head off. It's just a few miles. It's a rowboat trip, as it was for Napoleon. Oh, I think we're getting it. Let me put it on the screen so you can live the excitement with me as well. But it is important to know the maps, and I think with these tools, we ought to use them if we have it. Say what you want about Google. So we're going to take a look here. I think I've identified sufficiently Elba. I've been using Google Maps quite a bit as we're getting ready for our summer pilgrimage, going over the route and things. I still have to drive it, but it is a very helpful tool. Finally. Okay, are we good here? Okay, so we want to see where Napoleon was cloistered away the first time, and I think we have our man. So here's the Bay of Cannes. Is this Elba? Isle de Lorraine. Where is my Elba? Oh, I'm going to assume it's one of those fellas. Anyway, more importantly, there's Cannes where Napoleon gets off. And he's met increasingly as he marches towards Paris by his men. And so it becomes this snowball. Of course, we just have to go north. We get to Paris. And of course, as this is going, the news is spreading that Le Petit Caporal is back. And when that happens, Louis XVIII now and all of his retinue who had been partying it up and living on what they thought was the husk of the revolution, the corpse of the revolution, they skedaddle. And they're back to being emigres. And Napoleon is back to being emperor as he moves north. Almost as slowly as this map is allowing us. Here we go. Nope. Come on. All right, we're getting there. And then, of course, the war is back on. Now, as far as the coalition is concerned, it's helpful that they had not really decommissioned much at all in that year. There's always other squabbles and stuff going on. So there hadn't been much of a decommission of the army. So it wasn't that hard to get the other. There we go. Finally, we got to Paris. This is Paris, everyone. And so Napoleon gets there, everyone skedaddles. And then the other place I wanted to look at is Waterloo in Belgium. Now remember, the Low Countries, as they are called, Belgium and Holland, the Low Countries were part of the French Empire. And so we have to keep that in mind, that these weren't necessarily foreign invasions, as in your mind, if you were in the remnants of the Grande Armée, or for that matter, if you were in the coalition, you were on French territory for all intents and purposes. So here's Waterloo. All right, just finally reverse here. See where we're at in Belgium. Okay, so we're looking at this area in the south. All right, finally, the last thing I wanted to show, and this is always necessary as you're studying history, you should have these tools. You see a little pin here, all right? So south of Brussels, Waterloo. Finally, we want Helena Island. Let's see what comes up. All right, I think did it do its job? Sometimes, sometimes they give you a place in the Red Sea, like we did when we tried to find. Okay, this should be what we're after. And you can see, now Napoleon is not put on St. Helena until after Waterloo, but just while I had the map up, I didn't want to bounce around because you have to set up the screen every damn time. But as you can see, this island is literally in the middle of the ocean, between South America and Africa. Look at it, right? Napoleon is not getting off of St. Helena, all right? So this is his final punishment by the British. The first time they put him on Elba, and he got on a rowboat and escaped. The British are not going to do another 100 days. They're not going to put up with that. So this is a very stark punishment for Napoleon. So now I'm going to end the map there. I'm gonna have to wrestle with it, so I want to do all the locations at once. And now we're going to get back into our text. Okay. Napoleon's return created a perplexing position for any honest Frenchman. On the one hand, there was this adventurer who had betrayed the Republic. He had made himself emperor after all. On the other, the dull weight of old kingship restored. The Allies would not hear of any further experiments in republicanism. It was the Bourbons or Napoleon. Is it any wonder that on the France, Napoleon, and he come back professing to be a changed man? There was no more to be despotism. He would respect the constitutional regime. So if you're a Frenchman, here's what you're faced with. You're either going to go back to having a king or having no revolution whatsoever. So you might as well go with Bonapartism, because at least there's some elements, however obnoxious you might find his empire and his French Empire, there is still elements of the revolution in Bonapartism that simply is not going to be around if the Bourbons are around. So Napoleon gathered an army and he made some attempts at peace with the Allies. When he found these efforts ineffectual, he struck swiftly at the British, Dutch, and Prussians in Belgium, hoping to defeat them before the Austrians and Russians could come up. He did very nearly manage this. Keep in mind, this is important, and it might take some of the piss out of the romance of this time, that Napoleon is outnumbered at least 100 to 1. If you were to compile all of the forces of the coalition compared to what Napoleon is able to put together, he's outnumbered 100 to 1. Now, that doesn't mean in the battles that's the case. I'm just saying the potential power of the coalition, Napoleon is not going to win, right? He could win 100 battles and still there'd be a mountain to move. but in the moment, how intoxicating to see the new life of the movement. He did very nearly manage this. He beat the Prussians at Ligny, but not sufficiently. And then he was hopelessly defeated by the tenacity of the British under Wellington at Waterloo. The Prussians under Blücher come on in his right flank as the day wore on. Waterloo ended in a rout. It left Napoleon without support and without hope. France fell away from him again, a fickle lover. Everyone who had joined him was eager now to attack him, everyone, and so efface that error. The provisional government in Paris ordered him to leave the country, was for giving him 24 hours to do it in. Little known. Napoleon tried to get to America, but Rochefort, when he reached, was watched by British cruisers. France, now disillusioned and uncomfortably royalist again, was in hot pursuit of him. He went aboard a British frigate, the Bellefonds, asking to be received as a refugee, but being treated as a prisoner. He was taken to Plymouth, and from Plymouth, England, straight to the lonely tropical island, St. Helena. There he remained until his death from cancer, until 1821, or assassination. There's always been that knocking around. Did the British poison him? Devoting himself chiefly to the preparation of his memoirs, which were designed to exhibit chief events in his life in an attractive light. So he's going to win the battle of the books. He's lost the battlefield, and like the Confederates 50 years before him, Napoleon is bound and determined that he will not lose the battle of the books. And two of the men with him recorded his conversations, set down their impressions of him. These works had a great vogue in France and Europe. The Holy Alliance of the monarchs of Russia, Austria, and Prussia, to which other monarchs were invited to adhere, labored under the delusion that in defeating Napoleon, they had defeated the revolution. What is this? This is a delusion. As we will find out, in 1848, Napoleon left seeds that would yet bloom, turn back the clock they believed they had, and restore the grand monarchy evermore. The cardinal document of the scheme of the Holy Alliance is said to have been drawn up on the inspiration of Baroness von Krudener, who seemed to have been a sort of spiritual director to the Russian emperor. That's worth looking into. To say 19th century Rasputin, I don't know. My interest is piqued. It opened in the name of the most holy and indivisible Trinity. Yep, that's the old altar coming back. And it bound the participating monarchs, regarding themselves towards their subjects and armies as fathers of families, and considering others fellow countrymen, to sustain each other, protect true religion, and urge their subjects to strengthen and exercise themselves in Christian duties. Christ, in this document, it was declared, was the real king of all Christian peoples, a very Merovingian king. One may remark, with those reigning sovereigns as his mayors of the palace. The British king had no power to sign this document. The Pope and the Sultan were not asked to sign this document. The rest of the European monarchs, including the King of France, adhered. But the King of Poland did not sign because there was no king in Poland. Alexander of Russia, in a mood of pious abstraction, annexed the greater part of Poland. The Holy Alliance never became an actual legal alliance of states. It gave place to a real league of nations, the Concert of Europe, which we're going to look at next week, which France joined in 1818, and from which Britain withdrew in 1822. There followed a period of peace in Europe. Many people in those hopeless days were disposed to regard even Napoleon with charity and to accept his claim that some inexplicable way he had been asserting himself, actually been asserting the revolution in France. A cult of him as of something mystically heroic grew up after his death. And then finally, as we knock off here, And we'll come back looking at the continent of Europe. Just the final lines on Napoleon here in part 7. So we're skipping part 6 for the moment. We'll get back to the theme on Monday. The Napoleonic attempt to restore the Roman Empire was reflected with extreme fidelity in the architecture, dress, furniture, and painting of the period. In all these things, attempt to revive, remember the statue of his sister as Venus Victrix yesterday? Right, very, very, very Roman. In all these things, there was an attempt to revive the actual forms and spirit of imperial Rome. Women's headdresses and costumes seemed to have flitted out of the museums into the streets. The colonnade, the triumphal arch, swaggering back to the commanding positions of all the great cities. Paris gained her Arc de Triomphe, and London, duly imitative, her marble arch. The Baroque, the Rococo developments of the Renaissance building vanished in favor of austere facades. Canova, the Italian, was the great sculptor of the period. David, the painter, delighted in heroic nudes. Ingres immortalized Bonaparte Ingres immortalized Bonaparte princesses. He made all his sisters princesses as Roman matrons and goddesses, right? Like Venus Victrix. The public statues of London present the respectable statesmen and monarchs of the period as senators or emperors. When the United States designed for its great city, it was natural to select an eagle and put in its claws the bolt of Jove. So we see not only was Napoleon a great supernova in his day, but we see now in the early 19th century the great supernova of the Roman fascination that we've been pointing out for the past few weeks. This was a great inspiration to this period of revolution. Okay, so on Monday, we're going to go back to part 6 and we'll look at this Congress of Vienna. Take a look there and the order that sets up more or less until the First World War, with some notable exceptions such as the Franco-Prussian War and the Crimean War. But more or less, the peace is maintained after Napoleon all the way up until 1914. And then we'll get into chapter 37, the realities and imaginations of the 19th century, looking back at economics, technological changes, changes in ideas, 1848, the Russia-Turkish War, music in the 19th century, the rise of the novel, the history of Japan. There's a lot going on in this chapter. There's a lot going on. So we'll take it nice and easy, won't intimidate ourselves, and enjoy, as we will, making our way through this project. And the project, you can find out more about it at our website. We have a special subpage to it, but you're always welcome to join us for these daily broadcasts. We study all of Western history on a cycle. And if you're really piqued for this, please consider enrolling in Apocatastasis, where you have access to in-person seminars, additional recordings, lecture, and all of these good things that you would get at any old college. But we don't have any old college here. We have the project here. And so we have a lot to offer depending on your interest, whether that's more superficial and at a distance or much more involved. And we have material to scale that up, all of it in a synchronized teaching fashion, which you know is our focus here at the college. Anyhow, I have to knock off and get on with the day, and so do you. So thank you for hanging out here. I hope you heard about Napoleon in chains. And with that, masalama, valete.